We all want to belong. We all want to be heard. We all want to be free. Want to feel safe, kept far from the hurt.
Hi, this is Ben Hart. This is a talk about what speed reading can do for you and what it can't do for you. Over the next few minutes, you'll also learn the fundamentals of how to speed read. You've no doubt heard the claims. Learn to read 1,000 or 1,200 words per minute without losing comprehension.
Literally, the world's fastest reader, Howard Berg, is wrapping up Max Baucus's health care bill, all 1,503 pages of it, as the world's fastest reader and a guy who can comprehend every single word he whips through.
Some programs even claim you'll improve your comprehension. Who would not want to learn that skill? Imagine blitzing through War and Peace or the Bible in a few hours and coming away knowing all the material. You'd be like a supercomputer. You'd be like Google. The problem with these claims is that they're not true. They're a lie. They aren't even close to being true. A supposedly skilled speed reader once told me that he read all of Tolstoy's War and Peace in about 4 hours. This is a 1,000-page book. So I answered, great. Can you tell me something about the story? He paused, and then he said, well, it's the story of several families and their lives during the Russian Revolution. I said, really? What else can you tell me about the book? He said, I guess that's about all I know about it. Then I answered, well, first of all, it's not about the Russian Revolution. It's the story of 5 aristocratic families during Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812, a century before the Russian Revolution. Second, I could have learned this much about the book in 3 minutes by reading a Wikipedia plot summary. The reality is this. You'll never be able to read 1,000 words per minute and really understand the material that's written above a 6th grade reading level, or frankly, anything much above C-spot run. It's physiologically not possible. I'll explain why in a moment. But here's what is possible. I do think it's possible to push your reading speed up to about 500 words per minute and maintain a decent level of comprehension. The faster you read, the more your comprehension will drop. That's just a fact.
What do you do?
I read.
Okay. So do I.
I read.
Yeah.
I read kind of fast, you know? Like, yeah.
You're going to read really fast.
Yeah, I need a book or something.
Okay.
though.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay.
Stepping on a spider has to be the scariest thing in the world. Actually, you know what would be scarier if after putting on the one shoe, I recognized to put my foot in the other one and discovered that I was teaming with hundreds of spiders. All the babies were in there. A whole let's see, it's a food ski, full of fish. What a group of size couple. And I remember a whole group of spiders. That'd be the scariest thing ever. Unless you're camping out in the woods, or not even camping, or even in the woods, you're sitting in your backyard. I don't know. Maybe you like the great.
So then, is speed reading a useful skill at all? Should you even bother with it? Absolutely. Speed reading is certainly a useful tool. It's just important to understand what this tool is for and what it can do, and also what it can't do. What it can't do is enable you to read Tolstoy's War and Peace in a few hours and come even close to understanding the story. What speed reading can do is enable you to wade through a lot of material quickly to gain a shallow understanding of what the writer is saying so that when you do find something important and worthwhile, you can then slow down and really absorb and internalize the material. Speed reading is a good tool for figuring out what not to read carefully. It's a good tool for wading through a lot of junk until you find a few pearls of wisdom that might be hiding in there. I use speed reading techniques to read through a lot of business and marketing books. I'm a professional marketer. That's how I make my living. So I'll blitz through most marketing books in an hour or two. Most of the material in these books, frankly, isn't worth the paper they're printed on. But at least I'll get the basic points. Then, if I find a chapter or a paragraph that's worth reading, I'll slow down so I can really grasp what's being said. I might read that paragraph or chapter several times. There are some marketing books, however, that I read at least once a year because they're so good. And every time I read these books, I learn something new, some pearl of wisdom. I've read the Bible from beginning to end at least 10 times. I've put myself on a program where I read 3 pages a day of the Bible for a year. Then I start over and do it again. And every time I read the Bible, I learn new things. I gain new insights. What would be the point of speed reading through Proverbs? Does it make any sense at all to speed read Jesus' Sermon on the Mount? A ridiculous idea. I'm a professional writer. My dad gave me this advice when he was an English professor at Dartmouth. He told me that if I really want to learn how to write, I should read and reread the story by Ernest Hemingway titled A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. This is a short story. Many consider A Clean, Well-Lighted Place by Ernest Hemingway the greatest short story ever written. The entire story is just 3 pages long, a total of 1,413 words. That's it. If you read at 200 words per minute, which is about the average speed, you can read that story in 7 minutes. But I've spent at least 100 hours studying that story, every sentence. There's so much meaning packed into those 1,400 words. And that's how I learned to write, by studying that story, plus just about everything else that Ernest Hemingway wrote, because I want to write like Ernest Hemingway. To speed read through that story, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place, would be an utter waste of time. You would literally miss it all. All right, now let me go through the various speed reading methods with you. I'll then explain why it's basically impossible to read more than about 500 words per minute and retain even a shallow level of understanding of the material. I'm talking here about material of average difficulty, not dense philosophical texts, not biochemistry, but also not See-Spot Run. I'm talking about text on the level of a New York Times article. A New York Times article is written at a 6th grade reading level. A lot of people think of the New York Times as a high-level publication, but it's really not. If you have a 6th grade reading level, you can read the New York Times very comfortably. The average college-educated person can read material on the level of a New York Times or Wall Street Journal article at the rate of about 200 words per minute. But with some practice and training, I believe you can push your reading speed of a New York Times level article up to about 500 words per minute and pretty well understand the article. You might also be able to read a Tom Clancy or a Stephen King level novel at up to 500 words per minute and pick up the basic plot points. Though I think you'll enjoy the novel a lot more if you slow down. You can also watch a movie at double speed and understand the plot. But that's not going to be much fun, is it? Kind of defeats the whole point of watching the movie. In that case, why not just go to Wikipedia and read a plot summary? But before we get to the basic speed reading techniques, here are some tips that will probably increase your reading speed by 50%. Number 1, if you're reading on a computer screen, increase the size of the print. It's much easier and more pleasant to read large print than small print. 2, if you need glasses to read, especially if you use reading glasses, adjust your prescription so that you can read with your eyes 14 inches or so from the page or the screen. This helps increase your peripheral vision so you can see the entire line, which helps you anticipate what words are coming up so you can read them quicker. Number 3, make sure you have good lighting. Number 4, read in a room without distractions, preferably with no people and certainly with no TV on. This, by the way, is why houses used to be built with dens or reading rooms. Dens and libraries have pretty much gone the way of the dodo bird for the modern house, which is why people 30 years ago could read 40% faster than people today on average. They had fewer distractions, no smartphones, and they spent more time reading real books, not blogs. Smartphones, it turns out, make us pretty stupid. We're distracted all day by mindless text messages. OMG, LOL. Number 5, I also very much like stand-up desks. Stand-up desks help keep you alert and focused. I feel like I'm in the ready position when I'm on my feet. Ernest Hemingway used a stand-up desk. So did Charles Dickens. Sitting for long periods of time is a health hazard. It hurts your circulation and hurts your posture. Having a stand-up desk is a great break from sitting. You shouldn't stand for long periods of time either. I like to switch back and forth between sitting and standing while I work. If you just follow these tips, you should, without much trouble, be able to read at 300 words per minute with full comprehension. So about 50% faster than the average college-educated person reads. You are simply reading in a more disciplined, focused manner without distraction. Okay, so here are the basic techniques behind speed reading. What speed reading really is trained skimming. What you are doing is skimming material in a systematic, organized way. And you're doing some training of your brain. So here are the 5 most frequently taught speed reading techniques. Method number 1. Simply move your finger or pen along the text to increase your reading speed. This is a simple method and will increase your reading speed by at least 50%. That's because your eyes tend to focus on a moving object. If a bumblebee comes into your line of sight, your eyes will focus on that. Most people don't like to use their finger or a pointer when they read because they think it makes them look like they can't read. But what a moving finger or pointer does is help you move through the material at a steady pace. Start by moving your finger or pen at a pace which allows you to maintain comprehension, probably about 1 second per line. Here's the concept behind this. Most people, when they read, slow down because they get distracted. Something enters their field of vision, and they focus on that. This distracts them from reading. Even if only for a fraction of a second at a time, these distractions add up. This is why people with ADHD have such a difficult time reading for extended periods of time. They get distracted easily. Moving your finger along the line of text with your eyes following along the text will keep your eyes focused on the text and limit distractions. You can then gradually increase the speed of your finger moving along the lines of text. Here's how a professional speed reader reads. But I don't want you to read like this yet. In fact, I think this is pretty much of a fraud. I don't think anybody can read at that speed. I'll explain what he's doing later in this video. Just read like this. If you just read like this, you'll increase your reading speed by 50%, maybe 100%. Here's why. What most people do when they read, actually what everyone does when they read, is constantly think about the text you've just read. What you're also doing when you read is constantly going back and rereading text. Most of your rereading of text happens unconsciously. You don't even know you're doing it. It's something your brain tells your eyes to do automatically. But if you discipline yourself to just follow your finger or pen steadily with your eyes and not stop to think about what you've just read or reread the text you've just read, this will dramatically increase your reading speed. Disciplining your eyes to move through text on pace with your moving finger or pen will help you stop from thinking about what you've just read and constantly rereading what you've just read, unless, of course, you make a conscious decision to do this. Some text, of course, you'll want to think about. Some text you'll want to reread to make sure that you understand a complex thought or some new idea that you haven't thought about before. But what you'll want to do is eliminate all the subconscious and reflexive rereading of text and thinking about text. What some text does is literally cause you to daydream. It triggers a thought and distracts you from the task at hand. The task at hand is to plow through the material. If you're a lawyer reading boring legal briefs because you have to prepare for trial, it's very easy to get distracted by other things. Using your finger or a pen to guide your eyes through the text quickly that you have to read will easily increase your reading speed by 50%. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? I actually believe this is the best way to increase your reading speed. You lose no comprehension with this method. You actually increase your comprehension because your moving finger or pen keeps your eyes focused on the task at hand, and that's reading through the material as efficiently as possible. But this simple method won't sell you on buying a $300 speed reading course, will it? The simple idea here is to not let your eyes get diverted by distractions. Just follow your finger or pointer. I love to read on the beach, but I usually don't get much reading done that way. Too many distractions. That doesn't mean you should not take a book with you to the beach. By all means, take a book and read it. But it's probably best to make it light reading material, not your organic chemistry textbook or Plato's Republic, unless your purpose at the beach is to impress a girl with your intelligence. Okay, now on to speed reading method number 2, and that's to work to decrease or eliminate vocalization and sub-vocalization of what you're reading. What does this mean? What does sub-vocalization mean? Well, when people read, they usually repeat each word they are reading in their mind.
Quick, read the sentence in your head. Now, When you read that sentence, did you hear this little voice inside your head saying the words so you didn't have to out loud?
When children learn to read, they learn to read text out loud.
One day they were 10 Dalmatian puppies. Pongo was the father and Buddy was the mother.
Then they're told by the teacher to read to themselves, silently, just moving their lips. As their reading improves, they stop moving their lips, but they still think the words to themselves, as if they're moving their lips. This is sometimes called sub-vocalization. This sub-vocalization of the words you are reading takes a lot of time. The Air Force has found that you can see and understand a word in 1/500th of a second. But if you repeat the word in your head, this takes 1/4 of a second. So if you don't say each word you read back to yourself in your head, you can read 5 times faster, at least in theory, though not really, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. But the truth is, when you say each word in your head, it takes almost as much time to do that as actually reading the text out loud. What is the average reading speed? It's about 200 words per minute. Now try reading 200 words of text out loud and time yourself. What you'll find is that this will take you about 1 minute to read, out loud. Yes, you'll have to talk a bit fast, but you can speak 200 words in about a minute. Yet that's about the average reading speed. Do you think you can think ideas faster than you can verbalize them? Most of us would say yes. After all, when you're driving, your brain is taking in all kinds of information and making all kinds of calculations and judgments. But you're not verbalizing all of this. You're not engaging in sub-vocalization. You're just reacting to what you see. If the red taillights on the car in front of you come on, you slow down instinctively. When you see a stop sign, do you verbalize it and then stop? Or do you just stop where you're supposed to stop? You hardly have to think about it. You just do it. You don't have to verbalize or sub-vocalize this. You just do it. It's instinctive. It's automatic. The question is, can you learn to read this same way without sub-vocalization? That is, without saying the words to yourself. I would say yes, it is possible to a point, but not completely. The reason you don't have to sub-vocalize a stop sign when you see it while driving is that you've trained yourself to react this way. You know what to do the instant you see that distinctive red shape, that red octagon. Your reaction to red stop signs and red lights has become instinctive, automatic. To a point, reading can become instinctive also. How? Well, because the text contains many common word combinations that you see all the time. You don't have to verbalize them to know what they mean. The more you read, the more you pick up on these common word combinations that you don't need to sub-vocalize. You also don't need to verbalize articles and connector words like the, or, and, that, or which. These articles, these connector words, don't really add much to the meaning of what's being said. They just neaten up the sentence, make it grammatical, make the sentence flow, but they don't help much in your comprehension of what's being said. To illustrate this point, take this title of a famous movie titled The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Do you really need to vocalize this entire title? Do you really need to vocalize the word the in the title to know what this movie title is referring to? Do you really need the words the or of or the second the in the title? In fact, you can pretty well shorten the title of this movie to just Buckaroo Banzai and know exactly what's being talked about. All the other words are pretty much superfluous. So your next challenge for increasing your reading speed is to eliminate as much sub-vocalization as possible. To skip over all these kinds of superfluous articles and connector words and to focus on the nouns and the verbs in the sentence. What Google would call keywords. What do the nouns tell you instantly? Nouns tell you what the topic of the sentence is, what's being talked about. What do the verbs tell you? Well, the verbs are the action words. They tell you what's happening. You pretty much don't need the other words. When you ask Google to conduct a search, you don't type in words like the, or that, or and. You type in words like boat, or sailboat, or red sailboat, or 30-foot red sailboat. You can train yourself to read much the same way that Google conducts searches. You want to eliminate sub-vocalization and train your eyes to skip over irrelevant articles and connector words while while picking up the nouns, the verbs, and to some extent the adjectives. Though really adjectives are not all that important either to gain a basic understanding of the text. So here's an exercise that will help you train yourself to decrease and perhaps even eliminate sub-vocalization. What you want to do again is use your finger to guide your eyes through the text. Then, while you're doing this and reading, repeat some mundane phrase to prevent you from reading the words back to yourself. Say something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or say A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, or A, E, I, O, U, A, E, I, O, U. Basically like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
At first, you will have trouble reading and understanding the text if you're repeating this mundane phrase or mantra over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But after a while, you'll start understanding the text. And with more practice and training, you'll be able to move your finger and eyes faster through the text and still understand it, even while repeating 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What then happens is your brain begins to rewire itself to see the words and combinations of words without you having to say each word back to yourself. Much like that red stop sign, you no longer have to sub-vocalize. You just react instinctively to it. Your mind will simply just learn to understand combinations of words and groups of words without you having to say each word back to yourself. And as you increase the speed at which your finger traces along the lines of text, your brain will automatically skip over the mostly meaningless connector words and articles to focus on the topic words, the nouns, the action words, the verbs, and the common word combinations that you see all the time. I think you can read up to 500 words per minute this way with 80% comprehension, which is all you really need most of the time. This is how I read most business books and newspaper articles. I then slow down and reread when I come across something that's really interesting, or that I think I really need to know and internalize. Then I might even underline the passage, put a note in the margin, or write the thought down on an index card. In other words, really slow down. Go super slow, so I can internalize, almost memorize the profound point that has been made. This is how you use speed reading techniques the right way. Sometimes I just want the bottom line point of what the writer is talking about, or an overview of what she's saying. That's what speed reading is for. Other times, I really want to learn the material, internalize it, almost memorize it. That requires not just slowing down, but repeating and reviewing the material over and over again. In other words, the opposite of speed reading. The problem is I haven't found many people who want to buy a course on how to read super slowly. If you want people to buy that course, you'd have to repackage the offer. You'd have to say, learn French fluently in 6 weeks. That, by the way, will require a lot of super slow reading, memorizing, and repetition. If you really want to learn a subject or a skill, you have to read the text very slowly. More than that, you need to repeat the text over and over again, even out loud. Then maybe you actually need to do what's being taught, such as learning how to hit a golf ball. Reading a book, even very slowly and repeatedly, will not teach you how to hit a golf shot. You actually need to hit golf shots repeatedly, 1,000,000 times, with a coach if you want to get good. Speed reading through a how-to golf book won't teach you how to play golf. So as you can tell, I'm really not much of an advocate for speed reading. On one level, I would ask, why speed read something if it's really not worth reading and learning? But the reality is, life is full of written material that you have to plow through to at least get some understanding of what's being said. If someone sends me a 2-page memo, I'll generally speed read that. I'll look for the action items, look for the bottom line point. Then I'll decide if a closer, deeper reading is warranted. Most people speed read through legal documents because they're so boring. Those you probably should not speed read. Okay, on to speed reading method number 3. Focus on stopping your eyes from moving from left to right through the line of text at a steady pace. Instead, what you want to do is take a series of staccato-like snapshots of text with your eyes. What you're doing here is you are utilizing your peripheral vision to see a segment or a group of words on a line of text. What you're doing is reading text in a series of saccadic movements or jumps. Each jump ends with your eyes fixated on a stationary point. What you then work to do is decrease the time between jumps and fixations. You want each jump and each fixation to take about 1/10 of a second. That's the ideal. Here's how you train yourself to do that. Take a piece of paper or an index card and put 2 markings on the paper like this. What you want to do is move the paper or index card down the page 1 line at a time, then just fixate your eye on 2 or 3 points on the line, depending on the length of the line, like this. Fix your eye on one half of the line for a half a second, then on the other half of the line for half a second. Then slowly increase your speed. Try to focus on half the line, the first half of the line for a 1/4 second, then the next half of the line for a 1/4 second. If you're reading a narrower column of text, such as a newspaper column, you can often fixate on an entire paragraph of text, then jump down to the next paragraph. Take a snapshot with your eye of the whole text. You can get the gist of the entire paragraph in 1 second this way. That's why the old-fashioned newspaper was designed this way. Remember, 1 second is actually quite a bit of time. It's the time it takes you to say 1/1000. That's about a second. What you'll find happening is that you will start to see blocks of text more like a movie instead of as a sequence of words that you have to move through in order. As you increase the speed of your jumps and fixations, you will lose comprehension. Don't worry about that. Just do your best. Your brain will get used to the increased speed and start comprehending more. That's how you get to 500 words per minute with approximately 75% comprehension. This snapshot method of reading works well for going through a newspaper where only a shallow understanding of the material is called for, just to make sure you're up on the news. What you're doing here is getting an overview of the material, like looking at the ground from a window of a jetliner 30,000 feet up. You'll be able to get the big picture of what's down there, but not a lot of detail. You're seeing the forest, but not so much the trees. All right, method number 4, and that's to eliminate white margin space by starting your snapshot 2 words in or even 3 words in from the margin on both sides of the line. Whether you're using the finger or pointer tracer method of speed reading or using the fixation then jump method, you can further increase your reading speed by starting your reading 2 words or 3 words in from each margin. The idea here is not to waste time reading margins and white space. That takes time. If you miss a couple of words at the beginning and end of each line, no big deal. Your brain will fill in those words for you automatically just by perceiving the context. Remember, many word combinations are common. We use them all the time. Have you ever had a conversation with a slow talker? Often you find yourself completing the slow talker's sentences for them. It can be very frustrating having a conversation with a slow talker. You find yourself thinking, hurry up already, get the words out. So that's the idea of starting and ending your reading 2 or even 3 words in from each margin. Just not bothering with those words. Your mind will then fill in the words that your eyes missed. A variation of this is just to read every 3rd word. You can pick up the meaning of what's being said that way also. You can also read the first and last sentence of each paragraph. I do that a lot. Same idea. What is a paragraph? A paragraph should be a complete idea, often requiring 3 or 4 sentences, sometimes more. If you read the first sentence and the last sentence of the paragraph, you've probably gotten the idea. Your brain will fill in the connecting information automatically. This works especially well if you're pretty familiar with the concepts that you're reading. I'm a political junkie. I follow politics very closely. So if I'm reading a column by, say, George Will or some other political columnist, I can read 3 or 4 lines of the entire piece and get the point. I can then almost write the entire piece myself even though I haven't read it. My mind just fills in the missing info because I know the basic material and the concepts so well. I know all their arguments. What I might not know is the latest supporting information for their arguments, so I might be interested in that. The same with all the marketing books I read. I own probably 1,000 books on marketing and I've read them all. I can read one of these books in about an hour or less because I know the material so well. I just read the first line of each paragraph, take a kind of visual snapshot of the rest, waving my finger along the text, and plow through it in no time. I can then recite back to you every major point of the book because I already have a solid understanding of the concepts being discussed. But this method won't work if I'm reading dense text in an entirely new subject area packed with complex concepts. You're just not going to speed read through Einstein's theory of relativity and understand much. If you're reading in a new subject area like this, you'll also need a guide. You'll need a teacher, a professor. You'll need an entire course, probably several courses. You'll need to walk through this material slowly. It's like you're hiking through an unfamiliar forest without a map or a compass, with no trail. You'll quickly become lost and confused, and it won't help at all if you start to run real fast. You'll just end up even more lost and confused, like in the Blair Witch Project. If you're in an entirely new subject area, just like if you're in an entirely unfamiliar territory, you'll want to slow down, get your bearings, and then proceed step by step with a lot of thought at a snail's pace. Okay, method number 5, and that's to pre-read the material. What I'll often do is speed read or skim the material before reading the sections more deeply that interest me. I'll read the beginning and the end fairly closely. Then I'll skim the paragraphs using a combination of the speed reading techniques I've been describing, and then marking the sections that I want to come back to. For business books, I'll read the first paragraph and the last paragraph of each chapter, and then I'll read the questions at the end of the chapter. I'll skim everything else and mark what looks interesting and read that material more closely. This, after all, isn't poetry I'm reading. 90% of most business books and marketing books is crap or concepts that I already know. I'm looking for new ideas, new information. I'm looking for the bottom line points. I also call this strategic reading or strategic studying. Okay, but what about all those speed reading tools and software programs I keep seeing advertised on the internet? Do those work? Well, here's a well-advertised one. It's called Spritz. What Spritz uses is something called Rapid Serial Visual Presentation, Rapid Serial Visual Presentation, or RSVP. That's the acronym. What Spritz forces you to do is read your content faster. The tool looks like this. What Spritz does is flash the words on the screen one word at a time. It's then your job to keep up at whatever reading speed that you choose. I have the device here showing 400 words per minute, about double normal reading speed. It's kind of a neat idea, but frankly, it ends up being not at all practical in my opinion. As you can see, it is possible for people to read at this speed, 400 words per minute for a short while. But then I just kind of get dizzy and start feeling nauseous. This device is supposed to allow you to read your computer content fast while at the same time train you to become a speed reader. But there are a few problems with this. First, it's exhausting to read this way. Second, the Spritz reading device is unable to distinguish between content that you want to speed read through and content that you want to slow down for and really understand. It's the garbage in, garbage out problem that you get with computers and machines. I don't want to read every word, especially on the internet. I want to be the one deciding what I want to read, what I want to skim, and what I don't want to read. I don't want a machine deciding that for me. I like to pre-read material in a super fast, superficial, shallow way to get an overview of the material and then decide what's worth reading more closely. You can't do that with this RSVP system. You can't do that with the Spritz system. Here's also why I'm convinced that it's physiologically impossible to read and comprehend more than about 500 words per minute. Reason number 1, and that's the inability of the eye to focus on more words than this. You are limited to a bit more than 500 words per minute by the physiology of the retina and its ability to absorb and process data. You've probably heard the expression, the hand is faster than the eye. Magicians and cheaters at cards rely on this truth to trick you. You've probably experienced a bird or an insect flying suddenly into your field of vision, and startled you say, "What was that?" You know something passed through your field of vision, but you couldn't identify exactly what it was. Your eyes could not pick it up clearly. It might have been a bird, might have been an insect, might have been a bat, might have been a cat. You couldn't tell. So that by itself should dispense with the notion that you can read 1,000 words per minute, or 1,200 words per minute, or even 1,700 words per minute, as some speed reading courses claim. Your eyes really can't even pick up the words, much less comprehend them. What's more accurate is to say you can cover 1,000 words of content, or even 2,000 words of content, or even more, if you're willing to read every 3 words and practice the speed reading techniques described here, which are really just organized skimming techniques. And if you're okay with understanding perhaps 70% of the information in conceptual content, you can get a general overview of the content. And then all of this, of course, will depend on the nature and difficulty of the reading material. You won't be able to read T.S. Eliot's poem The Wasteland at this speed and come anywhere near understanding it, even at normal speed without a teacher explaining it to you. You won't be able to read Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce at any speed and understand it unless you've taken a course on the book or read an extensive summary of the book before trying to tackle the text yourself. Finnegan's Wake is almost impossible to understand at any speed, but for some reason it's considered one of the great literary works of Western civilization. Another limitation on the speed you can read is just the nature of learning itself. It takes time to absorb and internalize new information and concepts. I used to be a professional speechwriter. I wrote speeches for some of America's most famous political figures, including Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. When writing a speech, I always followed this rule. First, explain to the audience what you're going to say, then say it, then explain again what you've just said. Of course, you look for ways to accomplish this in an entertaining way, with stories, anecdotes, and jokes, devices that help drive your points into the brain of your audience, and it causes people to remember what you've said. A related point is that your audience can really only be expected to absorb at most 3 new ideas in a span of a 45-minute speech or lecture. If your speech or lecture contains too much information, too many ideas and concepts, you'll lose your audience. People can only process so much new information. After a while, it becomes like drinking from a fire hose. It's too much water going down the pipe, going into your throat. You'll drown if you drink water this way. The same is true with information going into your brain. The brain needs time to process new information, needs rest, needs time to internalize new information and concepts. Studies show that much learning, perhaps most learning, actually occurs while you sleep. This is why you can't cram the night before a test and expect success. If you study for 12 straight hours, you won't remember much of what you studied during the test the next morning. But if you study that same material for 30 minutes a day over 24 days, you'll remember most of it. You've studied the material for the exact same number of hours, 12 hours. But if you study the material for 30 minutes a day over 24 days instead of 12 hours all at once, your brain will have a chance to internalize the information. Your brain simply cannot absorb and retain an endless stream of information and data all at once. It becomes a blur, which is why it's such a crock that anyone can read 1,000 words per minute and really understand and absorb anything worthwhile. Now, can I read Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss at a speed of 1,000 words per minute and understand it? Sure, I probably can. Why? Well, because it's a children's book, but more importantly, because it's familiar territory. I probably read that book or had the story read to me when I was a kid 100 times. I practically have that story memorized. So sure, I can rip through that story at lightning speed and understand it. But that doesn't accomplish much, does it? To just underscore this point, think about what it takes to learn anything new. Special operations military trainers say it takes rehearsing a single movement 30,000 times before that movement becomes instinctive and you don't have to think about it. If you want to become an Olympic gymnast, you need to put in at least 10,000 hours of training. That's still no guarantee you'll be an Olympic gymnast, but that's the minimum amount of training you'll need. And you'll need to practice each move and sequence of moves 30,000 times each before those moves will become instinctive. What happens if you don't put in this practice to the point that your moves and your decisions become instinctive? Well, you end up making the wrong decisions. Your brain is simply not equipped to process new data quickly. You have to train your brain and your muscles to function instinctively without thinking. The instant you have to think, everything slows down to a snail-like speed. It probably took you the first full year of your life, maybe 18 months, maybe more, to learn how to walk. Now walking is natural and instinctive because you've done so much walking. You've trained yourself how to walk. You've taken 1 million steps. But it wasn't easy at the beginning. So you can speed read over familiar material pretty easily because you already know the material or the concepts covered in the material. But to really learn something new and worthwhile will require a lot of practice, repetition, and slow-paced, steady work. So that's another reason why the claims of these speed reading courses are such a crock. And by the way, your brain cannot profitably handle more than about 40 minutes of intense focus and concentration at a time. After no more than about 40 minutes of intense study, take a break, do some push-ups, run around the house or block, do some jumping jacks. This is why I'm so against the phase-out of recess that we see in elementary and middle schools these days. Kids need recess. They need to run around and play. They need to blow off steam. This helps them focus on reading and learning when they need to. When people say they want to learn speed reading, what they're really saying is that they want to learn more things faster, worthwhile things. So let's say you want to read Tolstoy's War and Peace, 1,200 pages or so, depending on the edition. I would start by reading a plot summary. Perhaps pick up a copy of Cliff Notes or Monarch Notes, or just head over to Wikipedia and read the plot summary. Yeah, I know that's a bit of a spoiler, plot-wise, so some of you aren't going to want to do that. But for me, I want to devote my brain power to reading and appreciating the details of the prose, not figuring out what the book is about. What I like to do is get an overview of difficult material that I'm trying to learn before I dive into it. With textbooks, I'll first read the questions at the end of the chapters to give me an idea of what's important and what the chapter is about. I'll look at the diagrams, the charts, the photos, the captions, the headlines, the subheads, in any text that's bold or underlined. This gives me an idea of what the writer thinks is important. This is the pre-reading that I covered earlier. Then I'll delve into the text, perhaps using some of the speed reading and skimming techniques that I've described to you. Then slowing down and highlighting or marking what appears to be important. Perhaps really slow down and take notes on what I'm reading. When you're taking notes, that's when you're learning the material. When taking an SAT test or other standardized test for the reading sections, what you should do is read the questions pertaining to the section first, then read the passage with the questions in mind as you read. The questions will tell you what's important. The questions are like your compass, your guide. If you just launch off on the passage having no clue what it's about, this slows you down. It's as if you've just been parachuted into an unfamiliar wilderness. It takes time to get your bearings. The questions in the test tell you what the passage is about. The questions at the end of the chapter of your textbook tell you what the chapter is about and what's important. This speeds up your reading and increases your comprehension and makes your study time more efficient. This is speed reading the right way. It's not about reading faster. It's about reading and studying smarter. When I took a course at Dartmouth on Dante's Divine Comedy, I read a plot summary. Then I was able to find a compilation of the 50 most famous quotations from the poem. I then read those quotations before reading the poem. I think this process helped me gain a pretty thorough understanding of the poem, enough of an understanding so that I was able to get an A in the course, enough of an understanding that I was able to see why Dante's Divine Comedy might be the greatest literary work in the history of Western civilization. I could not have gained this appreciation of the work if I had started on page 1 and had not done the preliminary scouting work to find out what this poem was all about and why it's considered so great. This is the case when learning any complex subject, whether fixing cars or coding software. When learning math or computer coding, I always get a glossary of terms and study that first. By learning the terms, you'll get a pretty good overview of the subject before you delve into learning the subject. You'll have an idea of where you're going. This exponentially speeds up your progress in your learning. Don't just start at page 1 and begin reading difficult material. Get the overview first. I found this was especially true of philosophy. If you start reading Hegel by reading Hegel first, you'll get nowhere. I was lost after reading the first page of Hegel. Read a summary of Hegel's philosophy first. Then what he's saying becomes a little clearer, though maybe not that much clearer in Hegel's case. Frankly, I think he was just nuts. His philosophy makes no sense at all, in my opinion. Let's say you want to learn a language. Do you know that you need to only learn about 1,200 or 2,000 words to have a conversational command of most languages? That's pretty doable, don't you think? Plus, you need to have an understanding of how simple sentences are constructed. Sentence diagrams of most Western languages look something like this. Again, that's pretty simple and easy to learn, don't you think? This is why it really is possible to learn a language pretty well in about 6 weeks. Once you know exactly what you have to learn, it makes learning a subject so much faster, easier, and more manageable. Basically, the fastest way to learn any subject is to simplify the subject, boil it down to its essence. Figure out the essential material that you must learn, and get an overview of the material before launching off on page 1 of the text. And never confuse fast learning with fast reading. In fact, fast reading is often the enemy of fast learning. Slow reading is often the road to fast learning. And don't let anyone make you feel stupid for being a slow reader. My father was a professor of English at Dartmouth College for 35 years. He's one of the most intelligent people I have ever met. He had a measured IQ when he was a kid of 160. He received the highest score in the history of Columbia University on his oral exam for his PhD. He was also a slow reader. One great way that my dad taught me how to love and appreciate reading is that he and I would often read the same books together and discuss them. When I was about 10, my dad and I were both reading the same book on the Spanish Civil War, a book titled Cypresses Believe in God by Jose Maria Gironella, and then part 2, titled 1 Million Dead. These are great books. And I noticed we were reading the books at about the same pace. And I noted this fact to my dad with some amount of pride. I thought he would think I was some kind of genius, that I was able to read about as fast as he could, and I was only 10 years old. But no, he told me it's not about how fast you read, it's about how much you absorb. Are you thinking about what you're reading? Or are you just trying to plow through the material? It's not a race. He would tell me he could read the whole New York Times in a few minutes, then go on to something else more important and worthwhile. And I'd answer, what? You can read this entire thick newspaper in a few minutes? How? He'd say, well, because I know what's important in there to read. I skip everything else, he'd say. And really, that makes a lot of sense. Think about what the purpose of a newspaper is, or of a news website or blog. The main purpose is to sell advertising. This requires space. So the job of the newspaper writer or reporter is to write a lot of text to create all that space for all the ads. That's why 90% of the newspaper article is just fluff, worthless, of almost no value whatsoever. There might be 1 or 2 facts in a typical newspaper article that's worth knowing. The rest of the article is designed to fill up space so the article can be wrapped around the ads. This is why you generally want to speed read or skim through newspaper articles to find the one fact or one piece of information in the article that might be worth knowing. It drives me nuts when I see a New York Times article on the latest political poll. I'm a political junkie, so I'm always interested in what the polls are saying about political candidates and issues. But all I really want to know is the raw poll numbers. Instead, there's paragraph after paragraph, page after page of analysis. Analysis I could do myself if I just have the raw numbers of the poll. Analysis that just states the obvious. Give me a chart or something of the poll numbers so I don't have to wade through all of this text. But the newspaper or the website needs all this filler text so they have space for the ads. This is where speed reading techniques become very useful. Speed reading allows you to plow through all this junk to get the essential information. The truth is, most of the smartest people I know are slow readers because they're only reading stuff worth reading, and they're thinking about what they're reading. Albert Einstein was a painfully slow reader. His teachers thought he had a learning disability because he was so slow. Apparently, he was spending more time thinking deeply about what he was reading than just plowing ahead, reading mindlessly. Slow and steady wins the race. Plus, the alternative to wading through lots of material to find the 1 or 2 pearls of wisdom that might be in there, the alternative to that might be to not read it at all. The reward might not be worth the price, the waste of time to wade through all that trash. Why not just read good stuff? Material that you would not want to speed read through because it's so good, so worthwhile, so valuable. Now, do I always follow my own advice that I've outlined here? Nope. I sometimes do speed read through material that I should not speed read through, like legal agreements. I also admit that I did the unthinkable by literally sprinting through the Louvre in Paris, the world's most famous art museum. I ran from one art exhibit to the next, spending 10 minutes or so in each room. I did that because I was on a very tight time schedule. I wanted to be able to say that I at least visited the Louvre when I was in Paris, saw the Mona Lisa, some Rembrandt paintings, some Monet, some Manet, some Picassos. I wish I could have spent the entire day there, or several days, but I couldn't because my schedule would not permit it. So I basically sprinted through the place in about 2 hours. Better than nothing, I thought. At least I saw it, experienced it at some level, superficially though it was. Sometimes you have to speed through things. or you won't get to it at all. You can also sprint through a wine tasting, sprint through the zoo, sprint past the Grand Canyon, sprint through dinner. But that's not really the best way to experience life, is it? Take some time to smell the roses. Don't sprint past the roses.
We all want to belong. We all want to be heard. We all want to be free. Want to feel safe, kept far from the hurt.